Daniel stepped off his motorcycle, the engine's roar cutting off into the quiet night as he approached his home. His square, well-trimmed bushes greeted him as he walked past. The house was large and well-kept, with a manicured lawn and pristine exterior. The moonlight cast a pale glow over the front porch as he walked up the steps, his boots echoing against the wooden planks. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the warmth and comfort of the house greeting him. The interior was spacious and tastefully decorated with plush furniture, polished wood floors, and framed pictures lining the walls. His steps were slow and deliberate as he crossed the living room, his eyes fixed ahead. He passed by the kitchen, where everything was neat and orderly, and made his way to a door near the back of the house. He unlocked the heavy metal door with a turn of the key, the sound of the lock clicking open, signaling another long night. As he descended the stairs, the hot, reeking air of the basement greeted him. He slowly walked down the stairs, each creaking loudly. As he reached the bottom, he flicked on a single, harsh bulb. The light revealed the bleak and sorrowful scene before him. His son. Jake laid in the corner, his body a sad, hopeless horror of a once young boy's frame. The skin stretched over his bones was so thin that it looked almost translucent, each rib and vertebrae sharply defined. A part of his spine had grown through his back, adding to an already unsightly horror. Skin covered with a grim mixture of dirt and dried blood. The filth clung to him, the accumulation of years and years and years spent in this hot, desolate basement. The dirt-encrusted floor was covered with the faint marks of where Jake had tried to crawl or shift his position. His hair, greasy and matted, hung in greasy strands around his hollow face. His eyes, once vibrant with life, were now sunken, the light in them extinguished by a relentless darkness. They remained fixed on the floor, unable to meet his father's gaze, overwhelmed by a fear so profound it was almost tangible. Jake's lips were chapped and cracked, his breathing shallow and labored. The metal chains that bound him to the concrete floor cut deep into his wrists and ankles. The raw, festering wounds, a testament to the neglect and abuse he had endured. The chains clinked faintly with each slight movement, a haunting reminder of his confinement. He had never seen daylight. The warmth of the sun or the cold touch of a snowflake was beyond his grasp. His world was confined to this, a prison of despair. His entire existence had been reduced to this, a realm where the only sounds were his father's thud of blows. His imagination could only conjure the pain of his present suffering. The concept of a life outside this basement was as alien to him as the idea of a world without agony. He didn't know what there was beyond the basement, but he thought it must be better than this. He dreamed of death also. Anything was better than this. Yet those dreams died very, very long ago. All he sees while looking up are the sound-reducing foam paddings on the ceiling. For the first 12 years of Jake's life, the basement was a place of relentless fear, not yet physical torment, but psychological manipulation, along with being caged to one corner of the basement. Daniel, his father, used these early years to instill a deep-seated terror in Jake. He filled Jake's early years with stories and warnings about the horrors of torture, the agony of untreated infections, and the terrifying consequences of poor hygiene and malnutrition. They were designed to fill Jake with anxiety and horrors of all of the things his father would eventually force on him. Once Jake turned 12, that cage was replaced by tight, cruel chains. Jake had never even been capable of hope. He does not know of anything good. He does not understand the concept of hope or escape, just the basement. Always the basement. Only gray concrete his eyes have ever bared. Daniel says to Jake, "Every day you spend here, I hope you understand that it's not just about hurting you. It's about making sure you suffer in ways you can't even imagine. Do you remember the stories I told you? About how infections can rot your flesh and how malnutrition eats away at your sanity? I hope you do. Because now you're living with them." Jake's mouth slowly opens and stretches widely with his eyes stressfully rolling into the back of his head. "You're nothing more than a freakish little pathetic, pitiful weasel. Do you think it's going to end?" He crouched down, his face inches from Jake's. "I've enjoyed every second of watching you squirm. Your suffering will only get worse. Forever." He then lifted his boot and smashed down on Jake's face, smashing his nose into his skull. Jake's body jolted violently with the force of the blow, a choked gasp escaping his cracked lips. Blood spurted from the shattered remnants of his nose. Jake lay there, gasping and whimpering as his father slowly walked back up the stairs, never breaking eye contact as he went up with a smile on his face. Jake laid there weakly squirming while letting out the most pathetic sounds. 10 minutes of dark silence later, Daniel descended the stairs once more, the air in the basement heavy with rot. He carried with him 4 large, polished mirrors. His expression was grim as he approached Jake, who lay helpless, squirming in the corner. Daniel reached into his pocket, pulling out a searing hot glue gun filled with rust. He plugged it in, and the haunting hum began. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The cold, cruel intent in his eyes said everything. Jake, still lying on the floor, looked up at his father with a mixture of fear and confusion, not yet understanding what was about to happen. The hum grew louder as he approached the pathetic, weaselly Jake. Without a word, Daniel knelt beside Jake and forced his son's head to the side. Making sure he wouldn't be able to close his eyes, Jake whined and squirmed like recently stepped on worm, trying to pathetically pull away, but his father's grip was unyielding. Daniel squeezed the glue gun, and a thick line of hot glue oozed onto Jake's eyelids. The moment the glue touched his skin, Jake's world exploded into agony. The heat was unbearable, like molten fire searing into his flesh. He screeched loudly, the sound a horrifying mix of pain and terror, as the glue burned its way into his eyelids, fusing them open. His body twitched violently, but Daniel held him down with ease. Jake's screams filled the basement, echoing off the walls and mingling with the faint hum of the light bulb overhead. His eyes were forced wide, the glue hardening quickly, trapping him in a state of perpetual horror. Daniel then retrieved 4 mirrors, setting them around Jake's frail body. The sight that met Jake's forcibly open eyes was one of pure horror. Every angle showed him the reality of what he had become. The freakish, beady eyes, the raw, festering wounds, the filthy rags clinging to his emaciated frame, and the disgusting protrusion of his spine. The hard, long, grimy hair, each reflection was more horrifying than the last. Jake tried to turn his head, but his father then raised the chains wrapped into his wrists, forcing him to stand. Jake's screams continued, each one more desperate than the last, as the full weight of his torment settled in. There was no relief. Just as always, and forever, the unbearable pain and the endless, horrific reflections that surrounded him, for which he could not look away. His pathetic, infected, blood-stained pixie Styx legs bend and crack under him, the bones creaking painfully as they struggled to support his pitiful frame. Daniel then begins laughing uncontrollably. He leans in and says, "Just wait for what's next." Jake's sobs were drowned out by Daniel's laughter as he ascended the stairs, his eyes never leaving Jake's tortured face. Even as he climbed higher, the sickening grin on his face remained, a constant reminder of the power he held over his son. The door at the top of the stairs creaked shut, plunging the basement back into darkness. But Jake knew that even in the shadows, his father's gaze was still on him, watching, waiting. A full hour of tormenting silence later, his legs long failed under his weight, and he now hung by his wrists from the chains. His father slowly made his way down the basement steps yet again, this time with a can of Natty Daddy in hand. Daniel tripped on the last few steps, falling face first onto the cement and spilling his Natty Daddy. Daniel screamed. "Son of a bitch." He slowly looked at Jake. "This is your fault," he says. Jake tried to scurry away pathetically, but could not move. His father grabbed him by the face and pressed his thumbs onto Jake's front bottom teeth and pressed down violently while wiggling his thumbs. Jake's attempts to scurry away were futile, shackled, and pathetic as he was. Daniel seized his face with a ruthless grip. His thumbs pressed down hard on Jake's bottom front teeth, forcing them down with agonizing pressure. The force was relentless, and as Daniel twisted his thumbs, the teeth began to shift unnaturally. With each violent push, the teeth ripped painfully through Jake's gums and jawbone, tearing at the flesh and bone beneath. The sound of cracking and tearing filled the basement, a horrific testament to the brutality of the act. Blood flowed freely from Jake's mouth, mingling with the grime and sweat of his tortured existence. Daniel then says, "Get whooped, faggot," and then runs back upstairs, laughing loudly. Hours later, Jake was finally able to close his eyes from the glue. His eyes were dry and cracked looking. Jake's parched throat felt like sandpaper as he extended his leg in a desperate attempt to reach the can of Natty Daddy that had been dropped down here earlier. Each movement was agonizing, his malnourished limbs barely able to stretch towards the can. After what seemed like an eternity, his leg finally brushed against the cold, aluminum surface of the can, a tiny victory in his otherwise bleak existence. But the small moment of hope was abruptly shattered. The basement door burst open, slamming against the wall and sending a jarring echo through the dim, oppressive space. Daniel stormed in. "Jake, I left my Natty Daddy somewhere. Is it down there?" His eyes fell upon Jake, sprawled on the floor, his legs still touching the can. Daniel's rage seemed to boil over as he stared at the contact Jake had made, his face now filled with rage and disgust. Suddenly, Daniel began to twitch uncontrollably. His body convulsed, and spit started to pour out at the corners of his mouth. His eyes widened in an unfocused stare. He grabbed a sharp, rusty piece of metal from the side of the basement as he approached Jake menacingly. Jake's eyes widened in terror as Daniel began slicing through his wrists with the jagged metal. The blade cut through flesh and tendons with a sickening crunch. The chains fell to the ground as Jake's severed hands dropped beside him with a meaty and bony thud, blood pooling around him. Freed from the chains, Jake's pitiful body crumbled under itself to the concrete floor with a sickening thud. He lay in a mix of blood and spilled natty-daddy, his exposed nubs of wrists throbbing with pain. His father then wrapped his hand around the top of Jake's forearms and squeezed tightly. As tight as his father could, he then, with the same tight grasp, moved slowly down to where the hands had been cut off. His extremely tight grasp moved down, forcing everything in his forearm to spill out of the opening at the end. The sound of his inside spilling out onto the floor was beyond haunting. Jake's face was nothing but a silent, stretched scream at this point, with his black under-eyes and bloodshot pupils. Jake, now 17 years old, lay on the floor. Most of his teeth were gone, leaving his gums raw, infected, and bloodied. His drool mixed with the blood, creating a nightmarish scene of a boy twisted into something unrecognizable. He twitched weakly, his body a crumpled mess of suffering. He looked more like a broken, lifeless doll than a human being. 12 years of anxiety-filled isolation in the basement, with no break, followed by the most severe physical torment for 5 straight years, every single day and night. His father, Daniel, moved with cold efficiency, grabbing the chains that had once bound Jake and wrapping them around Jake's neck. The chains were heavy, their weight a constant reminder of his imprisonment. Jake, defeated and frail, made no attempt to resist. He was too weak, too sick, and far too broken to even try to escape. His existence was confined entirely to these basement walls, unable to imagine or comprehend anything beyond the relentless torment and isolation he had endured for so long. About 18 years ago, he targeted a homeless woman, offering her a promise of food and a place to stay. To someone who had been struggling on the streets, his offer seemed amazing. She followed him, hopeful for a better life, but was led into a nightmare, the basement, where she was taken. Daniel's so-called kindness quickly turned into brutality. He did horrible things to her, all while preparing the basement for the birth of her child. Her pain seemed to last forever, a key part of his plan. His plan was not to make her suffer, but something else. When she gave birth, the torment didn't end. He said to her, "I must make sure it suffers like no other living being before." Daniel then murdered her to ensure her child, Jake, would be born into an existence of suffering. He carefully tied cinder blocks to her feet and dumped her into the ocean to ensure no trace of her or Jake was ever found. Now, with a child in his hands that nobody knows exists, he can do as he wishes. He loves to see how much a human can suffer, how pathetic he can make one. And he has truly done it. Jake, now at 17 years old, is truly beyond a tear-jerking sight. Never once conjured a happy thought. His body resembles a rotten corpse. Daniel can't help but laugh at the sight of Jake. He jumps and giggles like a little girl at just the thought of what he will do to make Jake suffer next. Daniel can't get enough. He finds it hilarious every single time, beating after beating, day after day, month after month, year after year. Daniel stared down at Jake with a twisted smile. his eyes gleaming with malice. "Look at you, Jake. You're not even human anymore. A sick joke. Do you even know what you are? You're the product of my cruelty, nothing more. I made you suffer because it's all you're good for." He kicked Jake in the stomach, driving the air from his lungs. Jake gasped, his body convulsing in pain, but Daniel wasn't finished. He grabbed Jake's hair, yanking his head back painfully, forcing him to look up at him. "You're a freak, Jake. A twisted, disgusting freak. No one would ever want you. You're too broken, too ugly, too pathetic. You've never even seen the world outside these walls, and you never will. You'll die down here, alone, just like you were born." Daniel pulled out a knife and slowly, deliberately ran the blade across Jake's skin, leaving shallow cuts that oozed blood. Jake whimpered, too weak to resist, too broken to even scream. You feel that, Jake? That's your existence. Pain, suffering. It's all you'll ever know because it's all you deserve. He leaned in closer, whispering, "You're nothing but my plaything, Jake. I can do whatever I want to you. You're too worthless for anyone to care about. You're just a pile of trash that I keep around to remind myself how much power I have." With that, Daniel plunged the knife into Jake's thigh, twisting it before pulling it out. Jake screamed, the sound echoing off the basement walls. But Daniel just laughed, a cold, heartless sound. "That's it, scream for me, scream and beg, but know it won't do any good. No one even knows you exist." He kicked Jake again, harder this time, sending him sprawling across the floor. "You're nothing, Jake. Less than nothing. And you'll stay that way until the day you finally die. But don't worry. I'll make sure that day never comes." Jake slowly rolled over, his body twitching uncontrollably. His mouth opened, and he tried to scream, but all that came out was a low, haunting scratch, a sound that grew weaker and weaker until his vocal cords finally gave out. He lay there, broken and defeated, barely able to breathe, knowing that his torment was far from over. "You were born to be my little experiment," Daniel continued. "I brought you into this world to see how far a human can be pushed. And you know what? You've exceeded all my expectations. You've become the perfect subject." As Jake's body went limp, Daniel delivered one final crushing blow, a deliberate act to leave Jake in a state of near collapse. He stood back, admiring the scene. "You'll live in this pain. I'll make sure of it. And when you think you can't take any more, remember this. You will never escape this hell. You were meant for it." Daniels turned his attention to the maggots that had infested his son's back. The maggots had become a haunting sight, crawling over Jake's spine with a relentless, nauseating wriggling, thriving in the festering sores that had developed on Jake's back. The skin on Jake's spine was covered in a thick layer of maggots, their tiny bodies moving in and out of the gaping, infected wounds. The sight was horrifying, maggots burrowing deeper into the decaying flesh, feeding on the infected tissue. It was beyond unbearable pain. The serum made sure he could feel it all, always. Daniel's laughter erupted, harsh and uncontrollable, as he picked up Jake's severed hands. Each burst of sound was a brutal, taunting reminder of his delight in Jake's suffering. He laughed louder and harder, the more Jake squirmed and writhed in agony. Daniel went to the other side of the basement and kicked one of the pipes over and over until it bursted. He unscrewed it to get it loose. He then walked over to Jake and swung at him with it repeatedly. After he was done, Jake was truly a sight to behold. He threw the pipe back over when he was satisfied. Daniel's laughter slowly faded as he walked away from Jake, his steps echoing coldly in the basement. The sound of his feet on the stairs was the last thing Jake heard before the basement was plunged into darkness again. The basement was silent now, except for Jake's breathing and the faint, unsettling movements of the maggots on his spine. The darkness seemed to close in tighter, amplifying his isolation and fear. Daniel, now in his office, closed the door behind him with a resounding thud. The room was lit only by the dim glow of his desk lamp. He walked over to his desk where a large leather book lay open. The pages were dense with his research on the serum, a creation he considered his greatest achievement. The serum, a closely guarded secret, represented the pinnacle of his intellect. It could heal any wound and reverse severe injuries, an advancement he believed to be the greatest human invention ever. The serum's formula was a masterpiece of science, blending ancient knowledge with modern innovation. The secrecy surrounding it was as crucial as its creation. Revealing it would undermine the power and control it granted him. He made the serum almost 5 years ago today, as soon as he did. He began testing microdoses on Jake for the sole purpose of taking his suffering to a far unimaginable level. Without the worry of killing him, the torture and the beatings became worse. They were already at a horrific level, but now with no risk of death, Daniel took his beatings far and beyond. Daniel went out of his office into the kitchen, baby blue, clean and organized, a bright and happy-looking kitchen. He took Jake's severed hands and laid them in the sink to drain the blood. He stripped but ass naked and put on his white apron and chef's hat. He then cooked the hands of Jake, the smell of burning flesh filling the kitchen. He treated it like a meal, seasoning the hands as they sizzled in the pan. He even hummed songs while cooking them. When he came back to the basement, he had the cooked hands on a plate. Jake lay there, terrified, knowing what was coming. "Eat," Daniel said. Jake tried to turn away, but Daniel grabbed his jaw and forced the burned flesh into his mouth. Jake had no choice but to chew, his tears mixing with the taste of his own flesh. With loose, infected teeth tilting through his gums with each chew, Daniel looked down at Jake and said, "Well, now that I have so kindly fed you, I will be on my way." Jake tried to yell, but his half-chewed hands clogged his throat as he cried. Daniel walked upstairs slowly. He slammed the door behind him unnecessarily hard. After leaving the basement, Daniel heads to his personal gym. He starts by punching a concrete wall for more than 10 minutes straight. The serum he uses helps heal his hands quickly, letting him keep going. Next, he moves to the weights. He lifts massive weights. For over an hour, he then grabs his 15-pound dumbbells for a relentless 10-minute session of shadow boxing. His arms give out halfway through, but he continues swinging, ripping his muscles as the serum repairs them. In one corner of the gym is a training dummy with a photo of Jake's tortured face taped to it. Daniel takes out his anger and frustration on the dummy, each strike driven by his hatred. After he is done mangling the dummy, he goes and puts on some clothing as he is still in an apron and chef's hat. After getting dressed, he goes on a mile run outdoors. He sometimes runs down the middle of the street with his arms spread out for his own enjoyment. He does a similar routine almost every day. Back in the foul basement, Jake lay hung there lifted by the chains around neck. The stench of rot and decay fills the air, mingling with the smell of his own sweat and blood, seeping into every breath he takes. The maggots crawling over his twisted spine add to his misery. The sound of the wiggling inside him ingrained into his mind. As the pain grows worse, Jake's strength starts to give out. His vision blurs. Exhaustion from sleepless nights adds to his misery. It's been 5 days without more than a few hours of sleep. His body starts to fail him. As he begins to drift into unconsciousness, the idea of escape, even if just through sleep, is a welcome relief. His head hangs low and his breathing slows. He slips away from the agony, finding temporary peace in the darkness. Daniel approaches Jake while trying not to laugh. He stabs Jake with a syringe. He injects a 60 milligrams dose of adrenaline directly into Jake's stomach. The effect is almost immediate. Jake's eyes snap open wide and his body jerks violently as the adrenaline floods his system. His heart races and every nerve ending seems to fire at once, amplifying the pain he was trying to escape. The drug heightens his senses, making every touch, every sound, and every movement painfully intense. His body, already on the brink of collapse, is now thrust back into a state of heightened, excruciating awareness. The temporary relief of unconsciousness is replaced with a jarring and relentless torment as the adrenaline courses through him, forcing him to face his suffering once more. He convulses in spasms from the adrenaline, causing the maggots to fly off as blood spews out from his spine. The sound of the maggots hitting the ground are haunting as they are huge from feeding on Jake, and his organs overflow with the life-threatening level of adrenaline. Jake lies wide awake as his body dies, while also being saved by the serum all at the same time. Jake screamed until his vocal cords ripped again. Every time the serum healed them, they immediately tore from the screeches of anguish. Daniel leans in towards Jake. "You thought you could escape, even just for a moment. There's no relief for you, Jake. I make sure of that." He pauses, letting his words sink in, savoring the sight of his son's torment. "Every time you think you're free, every time you think you found a break, I'll make sure to drag you right back into suffering." Daniel's eyes narrow as he takes in the full extent of Jake's agony. He straightens up and begins to walk away while clapping like a little girl with excitement. "Enjoy your time with the maggots, you little freak. I'll be upstairs." Not that you've ever seen anything upstairs. I almost forgot you have never seen anything outside of this basement ever. Not even a book or a show. Anyways, freak, I have a few things to take care of. But don't worry. I'll be back. He turns and ascends the basement stairs, leaving Jake alone in his anguish. The door creaks shut behind him, plunging the basement back into a dark silence. Jake is left alone to rot and suffer in the basement. The drastic amount of adrenaline injected forces him awake. He is incapable of falling asleep. His face is beyond gaunt and hollow, with dark black circles under his eyes. His skin is so pale and thin that it's nearly translucent, and the veins beneath are visible. His eyes are bloodshot, barely able to stay open, but incapable of closing. The only light in the basement is from a single old light bulb that his father only turns on when he comes down. His posture is forever slumped, and every movement is slow and painful. His muscles are mostly rotted and trembling. And even worse, some of the maggots have now gone up his exposed spine and reached his head and face, crawling through the thin skin and the mouth adding to his suffering with every squirming movement. The maggots rise in numbers by the day, the sound of them wriggling growing more and more. Jake is forced to be haunted by the sight of himself forever, etched into his pathetic mind. The mirrors still surround him. There is no escape for Jacob Smith, trapped in his very own chamber of reflection. The thoughts of escape have long vanished. He has become beyond hopeless long ago. Daniel sits upstairs in his living chair in front of his 100-inch screen TV, while Jake lay awake the entire night from what would be fatal amount of adrenaline coursing through him. Daniel begins to fall asleep in the chair for a full night's rest, with headphones on, blaring his favorite art piece, Valse Sentimentale. He would like to play it through his speakers, but he would never dare risk Jake hearing anything but the suffering of his existence. Daniel rests easy knowing Jake is in agony below him in his own manufactured hell. September 18th, 2053. Daniel lets out a cartoonish arm spread and yawn as he gets up from his chair. Valse Sentimentale still blaring through his headphones as he takes them off. The birds fly through his house from the wide-open backsliding doors. As the sunshine brightens the interior of his lovely home, he scrubs his giant island kitchen top before heading outside to trim his hedges. Daniel steps into the garage for the hose and returns out shirtless, showcasing his huge, well-toned body. He grabs the hose and turns it on, beginning to wash his truck, his perfectly maintained all-black Ford 450. The water streams over the truck, making it shine as he scrubs it with a soapy sponge. Most vehicles are electric, but he loves the roar of his engines. He occasionally looks up, waving cheerfully to passing neighbors with a broad, blindingly white smile. The scene is straight out of a 2000s movie, sunny, relaxed, and perfect. Daniel's friendly waves stand in contrast to the never-ending anguish Jake is enduring just below. Daniel then moved on to his very own custom-built Harley-Davidson. He used the Fat Boy 2047 model and improved upon it. The custom high handlebars and extra horsepower, now nearing 600, make it nearly unusable at full throttle. It is painted all black with no detail, but a single engraving spelling out "One Bad Dad." Both the license plate on his truck and bike say Daddy. A small sign on his lawn also says Dad Residence. He cleans both his truck and motorcycle and then steps back inside to get dressed for his mile run. He decides to take longer run today. It's a surprisingly warm morning, he thinks to himself, as runs the streets. Proctor, Minnesota, the town he so loves where the people love him. He's always doing projects for the community and homeless. The whole dad persona is seen as a joke to the town. They thinks it's odd, but assume maybe he just thinks it's funny or has a kid somewhere else. They're not sure. Regardless, he is loved in the town. A group of kids on their way to school spot him and immediately shout, "Hey, Mr. Smith!" Daniel gives them a thumbs up with a huge white glistening smile, and they smile with excitement, feeling acknowledged by the man they've heard so many good things about. The man who volunteers at the local community center and always stops to talk and help people, giving speeches and all that. As he continues his run, he passes by the local coffee shop where some guys sit outside. "Keep at it, Daniel," one of them calls out. Daniel's reputation in the town is impeccable. People know him as the man who's always there to support a good cause, whether it's organizing charity events, helping to rebuild the local park, or simply being a friendly face in the community. He's the guy who fixes broken fences for neighbors, donates generously to local schools, and never misses a chance to attend town meetings. The residents of Proctor love Daniel, seeing him as a perfect example of a man. Every wave, every smile he receives is a testament to the persona he's built, and in a lot of ways, the man he truly is. But in his mind, Jake must suffer. Daniel was a completely normal until he turned 21. He then started enjoying the random suffering in others, or extreme situations that he found amusing. The worst thing he did was take that homeless woman and forcefully impregnate her, for the sole purpose of creating a human that did not exist, that nobody would ever know of. That human was Jake. The woman who was in his basement for 9 months was looked for by some family but never found. A few flyers and posts online, but that was all. Daniel picked her up outside of some store just down the street, and she was never seen again. 9 months later popped out old Jacob Smith. He then killed the mother and got rid of her. Then there it was, laying before him his grand prize, a human that could suffer to the farthest extents of Daniel's imagination, and nobody would ever know. Daniel could continue his normal life and come home to what he would consider play with Jake. Daniel got to play the devil, and nobody would ever know. As Daniel reaches the edge of town on his run, where the houses are less and the woods thicker, his smile turns into a wide grin. Suddenly, he starts laughing, loud and unrestrained. Anyone watching might think he's just enjoying his run, basking in the warm morning sun. But the laughter comes from a much darker place. He tries looking at his phone to act like he sees something funny. But in his mind, Daniel's thoughts are on Jake, chained in the basement, suffering in ways that only Daniel could imagine. The thought of Jake's torment, the pain, and the misery that fills every moment of his existence brings Daniel to a euphoric joy. To the people, Daniel's laughter seems like the sound of a man in high spirits, a good man, enjoying life. But the truth is far more sinister. His laughter grows louder, echoing down the road, fueled by the image of Jake's agony, a secret that only Daniel knows. Eventually, Daniel's excitement gets the better of him. The thought of seeing Jake suffering up close again is too much to resist. He turns around abruptly, his jog turning into a brisk run as he heads back toward home. The closer he gets, the more his anticipation builds. By the time he's near his house, he's almost bursting with eagerness. He can't help but break into a full sprint, his heart racing, not from the exercise, but from the thrill of what awaits him in the basement. The thought of Jake's agony, the sight of him in chains, drives Daniel forward with an almost manic energy. As he reaches his front door, he's grinning from ear to ear, barely able to contain his excitement. He can't wait to see Jake and relish in the torment he's created. He jumps up the porch stairs and quickly unlocks his front door. He sprints across the living room and kitchen and quickly locks the back sliding doors. Now, he can finally go into the basement, shaking with excitement. He grips the doorknob and unlocks the door.
The cold eats my skin, the dark eats my mind. I'm lost in a place where the light's left behind. The taste of the crawling, they squirm on my tongue. This corner's my prison, where the silence has sung. Chains of the dark, they choke The stairs creak like whispers, the glow burns my eyes. I'm drowning in terror, wrapped up in his lies. He moves like a monster, too big for this room. The air turns to poison, it smells like my doom. Chains of the dark, they choke and they bind. The footsteps are closer, I'm running out of time. His shadow grows bigger, his smile's in my head. Every inch of this place is soaked in what I bled. He crawls on the floor like a game I can't win. His breath is a furnace, it sears through my skin. A needle of fire, it tears through my vein, and the maggots erupt, spilling out all my pain. My hands start to form, but they shake as they grow. The chains have let go, oh, but I've nowhere to go. I'm dragged by the hunger, the sickness inside. What's on those stairs? What's behind where he hides? Chains of the dark, they choke and they bind. The footsteps are closer, I'm running out of time. His shadow grows bigger, his smile's in my head. Every inch of this place is soaked in what I bled. I crawl through the sickness, my ribs scrape the floor. The stairs stretch forever, the shadows want more. I'll climb till I break, or the darkness consumes. In the chains of the dark, there's no other room.